everyone, and welcome to the Writers Project Book Club show. I hope you can hear me. I hope the sound is good. So welcome. I'm so excited about this, and finally, we are here to discuss the book, The Boy Who Spat in Sagrenti's Eye, written by Manu Herbstein. So the book is an award-winning book, and I must say, after reading it, I'm not surprised that it won an award because it really reveals a lot about our history that left me thinking that I probably didn't go to school. Before we go into the discussion, I'd definitely love to introduce my guests or let them introduce themselves, because they are here live with us. So, first person, please. Please start the person already.
Are you going first?
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Abena, Karikari, and you probably know me on Instagram as Kwatemaa. So, is there anything else I need to add? Well, I love reading, and I love especially African fiction. So, yeah. How long have you been reviewing books? I created my Instagram and YouTube, I think, 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 to 4 years ago, yeah. And how has the reception been? It's been amazing, especially Instagram. I didn't realize there was a whole, world of fellow bookworms. And I was like, where have I been all my life? It's been amazing. And through that, I've made friends from all over the world. US, France, Kenya, Nigeria. It's amazing. Yeah. And we?
My name is a writer by profession. I have some published work to my name. But you can find me on Twitter Pigeon Creator as a page as well. I don't like using that. Yeah. So,
you don't like using that?
No, I don't.
Where did you come from? How long have you been writing?
How long have I been writing? Officially, my first work was officially published in 2017. So you say that I was first pastor. I've been writing since as far back as I can remember. As a child, growing up, we used to write for girls and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So,
you used to write for girls?
No, it's
but
not
not boys?
Yeah, my girlfriends too.
You need to know more.
Yes, I've been writing for a while now.
And going straight into the book. So if you're just joining us, this is the WPG Book Club show, and it's the first episode since we announced it, and we are discussing The Boy Who Spat in Sagrenti's Eye, written by Manu Herbstein. It's an award-winning book, and I'm really happy that this is the first book we are discussing, mainly because it's a historical fiction novel, and it really delves a lot into our identity as Ghanaians and our history as a people, and giving us an eye into the history that happened years ago and what has made us who we are now. For me, I got the book, I think, 3 months ago. It's a book whenever I go to the bookshops, I go to bookshops a lot, I always see it, and I'm always looking at the cover like, nice book, but I never ever buy it. But then 3 months ago, I just decided that, okay, if this is a book that's been staring at me all these years, let me just get it. And then a few weeks later, I see a lady on Twitter, shows excerpts of the book, and then I'm like, wow, so I have this gem in my then that's what led me to read the book and then eventually pick it as the first book for the show. So how did you?
It's so interesting that you mentioned the lady on Twitter, the book press, because I literally got the book off her tweets. She tweeted about the book, and I had seen the title before, and it was always like an interesting title. The Boy Who Spat in Sagrenti's Eye. I was like, okay, I should get this. And then I see her tweets, and then she talks about what the book is about. And I was so intrigued that I literally, off Twitter, I went on Book Look and I got the book straight away. and then it's proceeded to remain in my collection for a while until I realized I had to read it. But I finally did read it, and I mean, we'll talk about it. So.
And you?
Well, I too have always had this like on my radar, like his books, all his books in general, and his book Amma in particular.
Yeah.
My best friend Ikwa, she absolutely loves it, and the field is, slavery. So when she said Amma is an authentic, tale of that experience, I took her seriously. I haven't read it yet though, but coincidentally, was it this month, earlier this month and last month, I'm part of quite a number of book clubs, some that I formed in, and we chose Akosi and Osman, which is also by Manu Herbstein, and I read that, and then when I got the invitation to be on the panel, and they were like, oh, this is the book. I said, okay, maybe it's Manu Herbstein month. So that's when I went to get it, and then I started reading it. But like we were saying, the title itself, it's always been at the back of my mind that, I really want to know what led to this boy spitting in Sagrenti. So, yeah.
And how was it reading the book? What was the experience like?
I must say, I wish I had read this back in JSS or secondary school. I feel like if I needed to write social studies or history exam, all I had to do was read this and I'll have enough to answer 2 essay questions. So I feel like it's very accessible for a younger audience, and I feel like I would especially get into the end of the book where you realize, there is fiction. I mean, it's fiction, it's historical fiction, so there's fact and there's some that he makes up to make the story interesting. So I feel like now I need to go and research which aspects exactly, because it feels so real, it's so believable. And I mean, it's an eye-opener. What I really loved were the illustrations, They're just, I mean, yeah, this is, it's a gem.
What about you?
I love this. I won't even lie. Me, I like hearing about our history as a people, and I always felt like we don't have access to the true history, because everything that we learn in school, or most of the things that we feel like we know, are just like whitewashed, but this, anytime I read something, I came across something in the book that I felt was interesting, I'll Google it and I try and read around it. And so when there's a part in the book where there's a bombardment of some towns, and when I read about it, I realized that this was something that the British used to do. They would literally decimate towns from the sea, and so people will not have an opportunity to fight back. And all these things they don't tell you in school. It's always like lovey-dovey, the British came, and they're here to trade and all that stuff. There's like a whole lot of violence attached to it. And I feel like the violence is properly spoken about or written about in this book, which it gives you an insight into how terrible it was for the locals and for people who grew up at the time. And so like this has been a great book to read. I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, it's a great book.
I really agree with you, especially the parts where you were saying you had to Google. I found myself as if writing a master's thesis, writing the names down and going to check who this person was, and being completely blown away by the history behind all these names, and how they started and where they are now, even their families today. I mean, for me it was like, wow, why didn't we read this? Why don't we read this? Why don't our kids read this while they're in school? Why didn't we get this part of our history? And something that's really important to me was the fact that our history has been sidelined to a specific kind of narrative. So it's very political, you just know about the Big Six and the strike for independence and all of that. But then our history goes many years back. So yeah, for me it was really important and a good reveal to read this book, especially knowing about the history of Abena. It's something that blew my mind.
The connection with the Asantes,
exactly.
I never knew that there was such a clear distinction between the people of Elmina and the people of Cape Coast.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I mean, like, these days we just call everybody fancies.
The
But
fancies, yes.
back then, there were like distinctions.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the people of Cape Coast didn't even they didn't recognize the people of Elmina as fancies.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
they, and I always thought that there was just rivalry between the Ashantis and the fancies. But it happens that it was between the Ashantis and the people of Cape Coast.
Yeah.
And there was this really good bond between the people of Elmina and the Ashantis. And
Yes.
I mean, that took me back like, wow, where has this history been? Yeah, so
Another thing I want to mention is that you know, we learn about the exchange of thoughts and the Dutch British exchange of thoughts and stuff like that. But I like the fact that there was nuance to it in this book, how it spoke about the people of Elmina had a relationship with the Dutch that they didn't want to have with the British because the Dutch afforded them some level of respect that the British didn't. And so just like the fact that they fought it, they were even angry at the fact that why are you exchanging forts on our land? Like our land is our fort. So why are you getting up and like? And so I really appreciate the fact that you know, like in the book, like Manu doesn't like try to whitewash like everybody else. Like, oh, there was like an immediate cohesion between the British and the locals. But this one, people were actively against them, and the British had to like not even too quickly resorted to violence to discipline the people and like overextended their hand by they literally bombarded the entire army.
it's
So when you think about it, it doesn't even make sense. Like something that you would have sorted out by sitting down with the chiefs talking to them went overdid it just because they could. And I mean, I feel like that's something that we need to understand about colonization. Like there was no sweet parts. Like, it wasn't a friendly thing. No one came with an extended hand to give us what civilization and take away our savage. It was strictly business, and it was strictly powerful people taking advantage of people who are as powerful as them. And I feel like that was really captured in the book. I really appreciate that.
You mentioned, I mean, the use of power here, and it really plays well when we see the Ashantis trying everything they can to fight. The only issue they had was their weapons. I think that if
that was
had
the only thing because they had a strategy.
No, but the interesting thing about this book I like is that there's no clear innocent person or hero. Because the Ashantis also had like motives for fighting. They wanted to control the coast. You understand? So it's like they're fighting the British not because they want to
take care about them.
So in actual fact, like the fancies, the people of Cape Coast, were how they were like ants went to elephants and fighting. So they were suffering, and I like the fact that Maine doesn't try to like he inserts like some relevance, cultural relevance to like the Ashantis, the people of Elmina and the people of Cape Coast. But at the end of the day, you realize that the people of Elmina and the people of Cape Coast didn't have to fight, but they were fighting. The people of Ashanti didn't have to fight the British, but they were fighting. Like there's a lot of conflict, and there's no clear innocent person because there was no innocent party. Everybody had like ulterior motives. And I think that was really struck me as beautiful. This book, I like this book.
This book, I mean, the more you think about it and talk about it, the more you realize how important it is as a piece of literature. And we were talking about the power play here, and it brought to mind the Danes, how they had some sort of good relationship with the people of Elmina. But then I found it very disrespectful how they just sat in their beautiful homes and decided that it is time to give up everything to the British without even consulting the people. I mean, what did you make of that? To me, that was really insulting to the power of the chiefs
and very dehumanizing as well. It really gives you insight into the fact that they did not see the people as fellow human beings who deserved that kind of respect, And, one of the statements that I found very profound that I think we made mention of is where they talked about the fact that we are not slaves, you don't own us, so you can't just be given off our property like it's yours, without the courtesy of even, hey, we are leaving, so we want to hand over control or the relationship we had with you, we now want you to have it with these people. There was no courtesy whatsoever. They were just dealing amongst themselves as fellow Europeans, and they just didn't care. They really didn't care. They just wanted to get what they could from our land, and whatever happens to the people, whatever happens to the families, they just didn't care.
To be honest, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised at the way that people of Abena reacted. Because if you've lived with these people for so long, the white people are coming in the 1400s. If you've lived with them for so long, you should know that they don't care about you. You are just, to them, you're just property. You understand? And they can sit in their castles and forts and exchange property like with pieces of paper. So I was surprised that they were acting as if like, oh, the Dutch were friends and they're leaving. But I guess you can never really know what happened.
Yes.
There's always so much context you can get from doing research about this stuff.
Yeah.
But so I honestly I wasn't surprised it happened, and I wish they had reacted more in a way.
More violent.
Yeah.
It's like they were a bit too. I feel like the kind of relationship that these Europeans created in their minds prior to the British coming with the level of force they were coming in with, it probably lulled them into a false sense of security. They probably thought, oh, we are equal partners in this business, I'm sure some of the men were, having kids with the women, their kids they were teaching their kids in school. And so all of a sudden, for them to see that, oh, so we are not brothers after all, I think it was a bit of an eye-opener and a disappointment because, even till this day, people say Ghanaians are very hospitable, So I feel like they felt, oh, we have a nice relationship, and then it's like you're just stabbing us in the back. Yeah, too much trust.
For me, while I was reading it, I think that what I thought of was, the people of Amina seemed a bit too dependent because they were dependent on the Ashantis and then they were dependent on the Lees, and it just backfired in the most destructive ways. I really wonder why they did feel that way. I don't know whether it was because of the issues they had with the people of Cape Coast, not being respected, and so having a connection with a higher power, which at the time was the Ashantis or the Lees, made them feel that they had their own identity. Because even the king, Kobunajan, he was the king of Elmina, even though he did try to fight for his people, he still did feel like he needed support.
Yes.
The Ashantis should come and support, the Danes should come and explain, and take back what is theirs. So I really wonder about why they did feel that way.
I think like it happens like Omina is not particularly a big town or Abena at the time. It wasn't that big, and there weren't a lot of people. And so if you're small in a world where like the imperial power is trying to overtake, you need allies. Which I feel strongly is why they allied with the Ashantis. Ashantis. Apart from that too, I also feel as if the dependency will be there and has been there not because like they had to be dependent. They felt like it was intrinsic in them, but because of the relationship they've always had with the colonial power. So first they come, they make themselves trade partners, and then before you realize you're dependent on them for assistance in certain things, because they have access to filtered water, they have access to medicine and stuff like that, and you're slowly becoming to depend on them. And this is a relationship that is cultivated over hundreds of years. So I can understand the dependency. And as a matter of fact, I feel like in that sense, they even felt like a loss of identity because they were unhappy. They weren't even unhappy with the Dutch leaving because they were leaving. They were unhappy because they weren't told.
Yes.
That's something where there's a problem there. There's a problem right there. I feel like there's a problem, if I'm not mistaken, as trans is still here today.
Yes.
I will try not to talk about it.
Yes.
But I mean, six to the book, right? You realize that there is some dependency, right? And I think like it's not something you can easily write off, but it's something that personally I think he captured it in a way that it shouldn't be captured because it's a problem that has persisted over years.
If you're just joining us, this is the Writers project of Ghana's book club show. This is our first episode, and we've been discussing the book by Manu Herbstein, The Boy Who Spat in Sagrenti's Eye. We've been discussing the history and the significance of the history, and also how the story plays out and what makes the book very interesting. And I'm joined today by Can-Tamakloe and Abena Karikari. They are very known in the literary spaces, and Abena runs a blog, and he's popular on Twitter, even though he does not like to admit it. And he's a writer as well. Yeah, he writes, and does many things. So back to the book. Let's dive into the plot, the structure, and how that makes the book complete. What do you think about the plot and the structure of the story?
That's interesting. Would you like to go?
Maybe I can see something and then
Sure.
you guys put your thoughts together. So for me, I think the story, the way Manu wrote the book, it's like he planned this for so many years. I really want to ask him how long it took for him to put this together, because it's not easy reading about history and then trying to find a way to make it make sense and then adding fiction to it. So I think that the plot was really well done. The structure also is very simple. I think anybody can pick it up and read. And also the language, very basic language. At a point I was thinking that maybe kids in JSS could read it, but then as the story went on, I was thinking maybe I'll take it to secondary school.
Oh, you think so?
Yes.
Because
Yes,
that's what
yes,
primary. Yes, exactly what I said.
But you love reading. I'm thinking about the general.
But you know back in school, if they give this to you that you are going to do an exam, you read it. So yeah.
So I mean the characters. Let's go into the characters. Let's talk about Kofi Jan. He's the main.
AKA John Coffee.
John
That part
Coffee.
was so funny and irritating.
And realistic, it's like as well.
Yes,
Very,
yes,
very
because even today, let someone from Ghana go to even the US, which has so many different nationalities, they will mess up your name.
Yeah.
They will mess it up. And so, I mean, if back in the day they were messing it up, it's not a surprise. And, okay.
The way they talked amongst themselves, the whites, it made me feel like they knew what they were doing. They didn't want to take the time to mention our names well. The conversations that they had about the women, the men, the chiefs, and everything just made me realize that these people really.
They are not
At the end of the book, and afterward, he says that everything that the correspondence said was lifted out of like the actual text, which struck me as I was phenomenal, because for the actual text to sit so well in the story, and for it to still be telling of who they were, I was like, see, I think I'm loving it. This has been a great book. But you made mention about the plot earlier, and I think the one thing that I really appreciated was that he wrote a historical fiction novel, but he didn't write it in a way that as if he was trying to educate you. He wrote the world very small, in the sense that we are following one person living a life in tumultuous times. And so Kofi Jan moves from Abena to Cape Coast, and then moves into forest to fight, and to witness the fight, and then back. And at the same time, there's so much going on around him that he's making us privy to, but not in a way that will overwhelm you. I mean, I read it, and I'm not very good with dates, so I literally ignored the dates. I only go back to when I realized that you seem to have gone back into time. So I just want to confirm where we are in by the date. But just the fact that he was able to incorporate everything that was happening around Kofi Jan without making you feel overwhelmed, I feel like that's really good, because I think about historical fictions, and sometimes the writers try to go overboard, explain every detail. This is why we use the riddle to pour.
And then it gets boring.
And then before you realize that you're overwhelmed with the information. I think I like the plot, especially. I didn't see the end coming.
Me too.
I didn't see the end coming.
And it's very believable. Like, you can believe that somebody lived during that time who had these thoughts and these experiences, And because it's written like diary entries, it's like you're privy to his personal thoughts, or it's like you're experiencing the world through his eyes, you know. But then, even though he makes his judgments, you are also allowed to make your own as well. And yeah, so I really like that. Like you said about the dates, it was only when maybe he makes reference to something that seems like, was this supposed to happen next? And then I go and check and I said, okay, he didn't write in his diary for a number of weeks or something. Yeah.
I appreciate the writing.
For me, when it comes to the characters, I think that the way the writer uses Kofi Jan, it's very strategic. You know, Kofi
Yes.
Jan is the ordinary gold coaster,
Yeah.
or Abena boy,
Yes.
and he's also a royal. So we get to see the story from both sides
Yes.
of the coin, and we don't usually get that. Usually, our history is more from the elitist point
Yes.
of view.
Yeah.
But here we have an elite and an ordinary citizen, and it just captures the everyday lives of the people. You know, how his sister learned the trade of his mom
Yeah.
and was very proud about it. How his mom was bringing the hairs of these women who
Yeah.
loved their very
Yes, I like that joy. Yeah.
the hairstyles were very interesting, and it just for me putting Kofi Jan in that character was perfect for me. I really wish to read more historical fiction in that sense, where
Yes.
we get the world through the eye of the ordinary gold coaster
Yeah.
family. And I think that was very stood out for me.
Yeah.
I think we can talk about Kofi Jan's uncle. He was the king. Ohene Kobina Jan. I wrote the names down. Ohene Kobina Jan. Let's talk a little about him as a character, because he fought. He wanted the British away. He didn't want them to take what the Danes had given them. And then he was exiled for more than 20 years. What do you think about his character not being in Elmina, and how it led to the destruction of the whole town?
I mean, but that's what they do. That's what the British do. When we left the school, or we learned in school that the British ruled indirectly, that's one thing that they also did was that if there was a position in the leadership, they took immediately through exile. They wouldn't kill you, because if they killed you, to give the people a reason to rally against them. So they'll take you. So everybody knows that you are alive. You're just not a threat anymore. And then there's always somebody, which I think Ohin's friend tried to do. I can't remember.
George.
Yeah, that's the one. They try to get a leading member of society to take their side and then help them sort things out. But the people were smart. And at that point, I feel like they were just fed up with the colonial rule and the colonial powers. You understand? So the fact that they took him out of the town was the reason was very obvious. And I like the fact that when he was supposed to come back, he said like, he's not coming back.
Yeah.
He let come back as a win, or he doesn't come back at all. And I feel like that is a proud moment for his character and for me as a reader, because you can take me out of my place, but you can't take my heritage out of me. I really appreciated that part. I also like the fact that he focused on Kofi Jan, told him that he needs to keep his eyes open around these people, and that's how they end something like that. And because people tend to ignore children when they read books. But what made me was that is that the main character, the most important person, is a child. And not just any child, somebody who ordinarily should not even be where he was, you understand? Because he was no longer really a royal anymore, but he was a kid who was hiding his Elmina roots because he was living among his enemies. But he was still able to be in a position of power and do something about being in a position of power, try to change the tide of war, which didn't work out. I mean, I just like the fact that. So, I mean, I feel like I guess the thing.
No, for me, the king, I think he said everything I wanted to say. I mean, the king really stood his grounds, even when he was exiled, and when they permitted, in quotes, him to come back, but as an ordinary citizen, he said that he would not come back at all. So he stayed another few years, and then he was brought But I think they realized that he was
He
old.
was
So
Yeah.
they brought him back as king, alright, but then he was too old to make it.
I think he died about a year or two
Yeah, he
later.
died.
But I feel like that's also significant for the people as well, because even in Ghana, in spite of the fact that we are currently practicing a democracy, you see that we have sort of translated the expectations we have of our traditional rulers on the president. For example, there are so many sayings which point to the fact that the leader of the people is, the physical and spiritual embodiment of the people. So if, for example, the chief should fall ill, it's literally, it figuratively means that the community is ill. So if he had given in to them, the people just have lost hope, because they are like, oh, even our leader has given up. So what are we holding on for, So, but then there was one thing that I was a bit skeptical about, and it's on page 17, where it talks about how Kofi Jan is related to the king. And it says, until I was 11, no, it says, my father is called Interbredi. He is the younger brother of our Nana Koduna Jan. Until I was 11, their father, my grandfather, Nana Koduna Kundia, was your hand. And I was asking myself, don't the Fantis practice a matrilineal system?
I'm glad you asked that. So I'm glad you asked. So I think it means that the Elminas, the people of Elmina, were not
matrilineal,
or they were not really practicing the fancy tradition as we know it.
Yes.
They had their own.
So that's the thing. I feel like we need to do more research, because I found that very interesting. Because you find that most accounts are matrilineal.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, so does it mean that there are exceptions in every group? So it's very possible that they're also practicing a different system.
I think so. I think that the people of Elmina, I mean, if you're from Elmina and you're watching us, let us know what the people from Elmina for.
I mean, I don't want to say because I'm like very wrong. I think that there are some form of one that
I have in mind. I know that the settlement was first, the one's first settlement in Elmina. But then I think that by the time this was going on, there had been a lot of interaction, and the account is a big group.
Yes.
So then there's a lot of mix.
Yes.
But they are not.
I don't think that. Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
So I mean, if you know the answer, please let us know. If you know a bit of the history of the people of Elmina, you can comment, and then we will take it while the show is live. There's so much to talk about, and there's so much. Please, do we have questions or comments on Facebook, Instagram? Okay, Amofa, she's a blog. I always get the name wrong. I'm she's a book reviewer, and she's agreeing with everything that we are saying. She says that the whites, they knew, the British, they knew what they were doing. So I saw that comment before. Anything on Facebook?
Someone is interested in getting a copy of the book in Takrade.
Oh, who is that?
That's Laura.
Laura, I think Laura can get. We actually have 2 free copies to give out. So Laura gets a free signed copy.
Okay.
So Laura, please, when we are done with the show, please send your details to the to our DM, and then we will figure out a way of getting you the book. It will be signed by the writer himself. So lucky for you. I myself don't have it. Laura, I'm very lucky. Yeah. So we have one more book to give away. I think that once we have someone on Facebook getting the book, the next one will go to someone on Instagram. What was I saying before, Laura? We had a comment.
You're asking if there are any comments in terms of the fancies and stuff.
Any comments?
Any questions in relation to whether the fancies are specifically matrilineal or patrilineal?
I think it depends. I see this one. I don't like my brain. I have so many little, and I can't accurately quote. But I think that some people practice.
So I find online about everything, and then I found another book that I'm going to read next. It's actually Java Hill. So let me just grab it. Yeah, so I got this book. Java Hill, and funny enough, I was just going through it, and then there's a picture of Kobinajan in it. You know? So then it just shows, yeah.
Interesting.
So it just shows how factual women, they did a really good job getting the facts, and I think that for a writer of his caliber, if the facts were not wrong by now, we would have had issues with different groups of people. So for that, I can really put my foot down and say much of the facts are accurate. We have a comment from What Amafa reads, and she's saying, unrelated, but my favorite thing about this book is how much it pushes back against the notion that Africans were happy to sell each other when it was just a few sellouts. That's a really good point. And then she goes on to say, and the majority were very much committed to protest and revolution. That is a really good point. And I'm sorry, I'm not good with names. I'm so sorry.
No, but I like that part about the protest. It's something that we have taken for granted, like, as a present people. I mean, we feel as if Ghanaians, we like saying Ghanaians are laid back, Ghanaians are farmers, it has never been like that. As far back as like just the previous generation, like university students have been protesting for years. Even today, like in the space of like 4 months, you can have at least 8 protests. So it's something that I feel like it's a narrative that's been forced on us, but that's not how we read as people. And so I like that she made that comment. Offer respect.
And I feel like it's also important because that's one of the things that sort of continues to create a divide between blacks on the continent and those in the diaspora, because there's this narrative that those on the continent sold their brothers and sisters, but the large majority, like Amafo was saying, when it was by force and so I really like that.
Time is really running, sadly, but then I think we can talk a bit about the themes in the book, the themes that stand out. For me, I would say friendship. The theme of friendship was very significant. I mean, you see the issues that came about because of the Europeans coming and destroying families and friends and people who are already on the land. So, take for instance, Mr. Emitsan and Ohinijan. I mean, their friendship just really was destroyed because of their different perspectives. And also, the relationship between Mr. Prior, the illustrator, the illustrator, who actually is one of the most celebrated illustrators in England to date, because he was but he was doing illustrations across Africa, not only in Ghana, across Africa for newspapers. So I went to read about him as well, and he happens to be a very big figure.
And you see how his character signifies how who has power tells the story. You know that thing about how. So, and I like how Manu, I feel like in Kofi Jan's character, he brought in statements that probably he himself thinks to sort of poke holes in characters that are revered and celebrated by Europeans, because he was doing selective illustration. Remember the part where Kofi Jan was like, how come you did the illustrations of the soldiers when they were not there yet? So why don't you do the illustration of the man who was flogged against the tree? And they said, oh no, I can't do that because then those who are against this whole enterprise will have fodder for them. I was like, wow.
The narrative was
everything they were doing was calculated right to the minutest detail. It's terrifying and amazing,
But for me, I think that something that was really interesting was the illustrator's character. When he was explaining that to Kofi, it made me realize how, although we didn't really enjoy them being here, many of them that came didn't come on their own will. And they were made to put a lot of their views and ideologies aside because they had to make a living.
Yes.
So some of them were conflicted about what was happening, but then they were still doing their job and they were being pushed around by a higher power that wasn't even in the country.
Yes.
That for me also stood out in the book.
Yeah.
But coming back to the theme of friendship, I was going to discuss the friendship between Kofi Jan and the illustrator. They didn't seem to get along at all. I don't think that.
I wouldn't say they didn't get. There wasn't a drama, but I think that's because Kofi disliked the man, and the man didn't respect Kofi.
Yeah.
So it was literally a relationship of master and servant,
Yeah.
boss and employee.
Yeah.
And so Kofi did his job as an employee. He did his job really well.
Yeah.
And his boss also did his job as paying him as a
Yeah.
But they didn't have a friendship. They didn't have anything to do, which was surprising because I assumed that from the way, but I mean, I should have guessed from the way they even interacted. Like the first time they actually spoke, and he spoke to him about the job.
Yeah.
I should have gotten from the flippant way you mentioned it that they weren't going to be friends. But I thought they were going to be friends.
Yeah.
I felt like
Because
this
they
was
were
a good
going
guy.
so much.
Silly me. Sounds like it was the worst of the lot.
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I wasn't very surprised. But at the same time, I was in a way. But like you mentioned about themes, I wanted to say that my favorite thing that was in the book, like my absolute favorite thing, like the thing that blew my mind was the plan between Abigail and Kofi Jan. The intelligence bit, like, the way he would reach out to Kofi Jan from the bush. The way I was like, yo, this is like espionage at this point.
Yes.
You know, and I'm like a spy for me.
Like you imagine this as a movie.
Listen, so when like, I saw the imagining of what traditional intelligence looked like, I was blown away. I was like,
Me too. I'm glad you mentioned
this
that.
is
Because it just shows how we're able to communicate to the latter bit. We're able to communicate in a way that two of us will communicate without you knowing, or you could be here and then you hear an odd sound and someone is talking to you. I wish we still had that kind of communication. It was more powerful and more our style. Was really more our style.
Another thing that I liked was that the fact that even though the British won that war, they didn't really win the war because
it wasn't a war.
Yeah, they're essentially literally like left, give them way to go and sack Kumasi and come back. And I feel like it was a decision like, you know, they come to kill us anyways. Rather than we spending our lives fighting over gold that we have in abundance.
Yes,
Come and take it away.
Exactly.
You know, so and then the British were thinking almost like the Sagrenti was like, oh, like, you know, the Advance were like, you didn't fight. You know, but like, I mean, like the force that the men was like a tiny fraction of what the Ashanti was. So I feel like it showed that our leadership would make sound decisions. Colonization is not a reflection of poor leadership or like what's it called, like a lack of intelligence on our part. It's just like we have the unfortunate position of being less powerful than our enemies. And that's the whole truth about it. I feel like that's something that was worth mentioning.
And even that it was just in terms of the weaponry, you know.
Yes.
They were using way more advanced weapons. And basically what they had been trading with probably the Dutch and other Europeans before the British came, they had just been selling them old weaponry. So they didn't have much of a chance. And one thing that also stood out to me is how there are hierarchies of racism. Did you see the part where the names kept confusing me? There was a gentleman who came in, I should know his name because he's one of the top men.
Oh, okay, Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed?
No, before that. It was him, Mr. Henty, Mr. Pryor.
Mr. Morton?
Mr. Henry Morton.
One of them was Welsh, and there was sort of like an inside joke amongst the Brits versus the Welsh. And Kofi Jan even made a comment saying that, so there are other people that they treat as bad as blacks. And I was like, it shows that there's levels to this thing. Yeah.
I mean,
Those people, they are mad.
they're also fighting for world dominance. I mean, the more places that they conquered in Africa, the more power they had globally. So it just shows that they will definitely not respect the Danes after they fought Elmina and other parts of West Africa, because now they had the final say. And gold and pepper and oil and salt were from these places. And once you had control over that globally, you were more or less the king of the world. I don't want us to give a lot away so that it gets people to buy the book and read it. Yes. But before we wrap up, it's been really interesting here. Let's talk about the significance of historical nonfiction as a genre in Ghana and in general. What are your thoughts? I mean, for me, I'm a lover of historical nonfiction because I love history.
Okay.
I mean, historical fiction. I'm a lover of historical fiction because I love history. Yes. So getting to read history in a more entertaining way makes it more lovable, makes it more likable. It makes you wonder and also want to go and do your own findings. What are your thoughts about it?
I love historical fiction, and for the most part, I feel like I'm drawn a lot to historical fiction sets during these times, like the 19th century, 18th century, and so on. But I haven't read that much historical fiction set in Ghana, and so this book is like, you're living here. I can't imagine if I was reading this if I was in Abena. I'll just be imagining how the place was at the time, And like you said, it makes it more enjoyable, more entertaining, and it gives you the edge to want to know more about that particular time and that particular event. And so, I mean, if you haven't read historical fiction, you should start with this. Especially if you're in Ghana.
I mean, I also agree with that. I love historical fiction. I think the best names, contemporary names are doing amazing, like Kenyan writers like Aisha Haruna.
Yes.
Yeah, just also recently came out with a book. The thing about the historical, I think it's extremely important actually, because what happens when you read an historical novel, like historical fiction novels, that you're reading someone's research work in a way that's easily digestible to you. So by the time you finish, like if you read this book, you can know that this will happen between 1870 to 1880 when the British and Dutch exchanged forts. Not all of it is fact, because obviously there are some characters that are fictional, but generally everything that happened occurred in our past. And so, like, once you're able to get, I feel like this is the way for it, to be honest. This is how we teach our children and teach ourselves about our past. People do great research work, write it into fiction, we read it, we enjoy it for the story, but we go away with something. And I feel like if we continue on this path, this book came out in 2014. I mean, even 100 years down the line, this is still relevant.
Yes.
You understand? And so it's something that we need to do more of, even though the people who are doing amazing work. So anybody who's writing, who's reading, and listening, should, if you're a reader, demand your favorite writers to write historical fiction. If you're a writer, write it. It doesn't have to be like a full-length novel. A short story based on something. So,
I agree totally with everything that you said. I think that it's really important that we get a lot of our history into the creative arts industry, not just literature, but we can take it into film, into photography. These are things that people enjoy, popular culture, people enjoy it so much. And the only way we can get people to know about their history and their identity is by incorporating the facts into what they enjoy consuming. So that it's easier. So for me, definitely, I would love to see more of our history written in the fictional genre, and in this style, if possible, through the eyes of an ordinary Gold Coaster, Elmina person, someone from Takrade, just the ordinary person. I would really love to see more of this, more, and more. So if you are a writer, like Free said, you could get the book and get inspired. And there's so many pieces of history that were left undone here. So you could pick the littlest thing and make it into a very beautiful story and maybe win an award since a lot of writers want to win some money. So you do something great, your name lives on and you make some money as well. But even if not, I mean, this is a good way to keep our history fresh and remain with us years and years and years to come. Any last comments about the book? I mean, if you could sell this book for Manu Herbstein, how would you do it in 1 minute?
In 1 minute.
You're testing your marketing skills.
Oh, see, this one right now. No, but honestly, you should read this book. I read it, I finished it in like about 2 hours. I couldn't put it down. I started, I actually thought that, oh, I was thinking about like, get distracted. When I started, 2 hours I was done. And then I wanted to read it again. I was like, yo, I don't have time to do that. But I do plan on reading it again.
Yeah, like walk carefully and
yeah. You know, it was like highlights. I didn't want to highlight in this book because like, I don't like spoiling my page. So I'm probably going to get another copy where I can highlight and everything.
Me, I use pencil.
Oh, you see,
and then I'll get a pristine, copy one.
see, I read comments. But anyway, why this book, right? Protect that was, I mean, I don't think I'm the reason yet. Why this book, that's why I pitch. I feel like I did more than 1 minute.
Yes, yeah. And you, Abena, what are your...
Well, yeah, I feel like, especially if you have kids, like we were saying before the show started, if you have a kid in class 6, JSS, secondary school, this is so easy to read. And I feel like any kid who gets to read this will, though their eyes will just open to a whole new world they did not know existed, because I feel like our curriculum is extremely lacking in terms of giving the full details of our history. And I wish there could be books about, all the different important events that have taken place in our history. From the north all the way down to the south. Every significant historical event needs to be put in writing so that we can learn more and enjoy more. And So,
do you have any comments before we go?
Actually, the name was Lawrence, not Lawrence.
Lawrence.
So Lawrence won the book. According to Lawrence, the fancies are matrilineal, not patrilineal. So that's from his point of view.
Anything
I
else?
think what the question you were asking is the people of Abena specifically. I think we still need to.
Yeah. Anything from Instagram?
No.
Okay. All right. I mean, this has been a very interesting conversation. We still have a book to give away on Instagram. I think that we'll give it to yeah, so you get a signed copy because she has been very interactive with us. You get a signed copy of the book and we'll find a way to get it to you once it's signed. Yeah, and thank you, Abena, and thank you, Kwee, for joining us for the very first episode of the WPG Book Club show. So next month we'll be reading Of Women and Frogs by Bisi Ajapon, and we'll reveal our guests as time goes on. But you can get a copy and start reading for the month of September. We'll put the notice out. And I hope you enjoy the show. You can send us a DM about your comments or how we can make it better, because this show is really for you to get people reading. So thank you so much, and till next month, keep reading, get a copy of Women and Frogs, and join us in September.